This is Jan Detrie. Today I'm going to read an excerpt from my latest book, A Glint in Her Eyes, the second book in the Gaston the Poodle Cozy Mystery Series. In this book, Vlad Chomsky has taken his lady, Beatrice, on a romantic Rhine River cruise, hoping to get away from family, from work pressures, and most of all from his eccentric landlady, Sandra Tewksbury, and her ill-tempered dog, Gaston. Beatrice and Vlad have just checked in on the riverboat when they hear a loud disturbance on the gangplank. "What is that crazy lady trying to do?" a voice said. "It looks like she's trying to bring a dog on board, a fat little poodle on a leash." "It couldn't be," Vlad exclaimed, and he pushed himself into the crowd. But it was. Below him, Sandra Tewksbury, in the aged flesh, pointed to the crumpled vest adorning Gaston with bold lettering. The overweight poodle with the dingy white fur wagged his tail, but showed no sign of retreating from the gangplank. "Can't you read, young man? It says service dog on his harness. This dog is a highly trained service dog, my service dog," she declared. "He accompanies me wherever I go because of my disability." The attendant grew flushed, but said firmly, "Like I said, madame, no dogs are allowed on board the ship. I was told by the young man who made my reservation that service dogs were allowed on board ship." "That dog doesn't look like any service dog I've ever seen," sneered the older crew member manning the gangplank. "He looks like a clown dog escaped from the circus." "I'll have you know, young man, I'm prone to seizures, and this service dog warns me and my traveling companion when I'm about to lose consciousness." Sandra said. "Your traveling companion? Who might that be?" asked the crew member. Vlad groaned as Norm pushed his way through the throng, bottlenecked at the gangplank, and planted himself next to Sandra, resting his fists on his hips. "I'm your traveling companion. I was trained in first aid, and I know what to do when her service dog gives the warning," he declared. "If that fat mongrel is a service dog, then I'm Angela Merkel," snorted the older man. "You don't know who you're dealing with, sir. I've long retired from show business, but I still have friends in high places. You don't want to tangle with talk show hosts. They will smear your cruise line all over the internet." Sandra threatened. "Check me out on YouTube. My dog and I are celebrities." Sandra opened her purse and began rummaging through its contents, scattering used tissues, a half-eaten Mars bar, and several restaurant receipts on the ground. "Here it is, the headline story from the New York Times. Dog brings down terrorists." She thrust the Crawford Daily Gazette in the crew member's face. "Madame, this is not the New York Times," he said. "It's some small-town paper." "Don't you get smart with me. The New York paper ran the story too. It was all over the country. My dog is famous." "I don't dispute that, madame, but famous or not, I can't go against the ship's policy," said the man, running a meaty hand through his thinning hair. "I could lose my job." "Then I demand to talk to your captain. You can check with Laurent, who made the reservation. He told me my service dog was allowed on board with me." Just then, Vlad felt a burly man in an immaculate white uniform push past him, captain insignia gleaming. "What seems to be the problem, Seaman Klaus?" he growled. "This elderly lady wants to bring her dog on board, and I told her that's not possible." "He's a service dog, Captain. I need him to warn Norm here when I'm about to have a seizure. I was informed that service dogs are allowed." She thrust her chin out defiantly. The captain scratched his head before he spoke. "Yes, they are allowed in certain cases, but we have to be notified beforehand so special accommodations can be made. This was a last-minute cancellation. I just made the reservation yesterday, and your representative, Laurent, assured me the necessary piece of paperwork had been filed with you. I'll check with headquarters, madame, if you'll just step aside and let the other guests through. He looked at all the disgruntled passengers behind her and Norm. Vlad saw Sandra flick her index finger at Gaston. Immediately, he began to bark loudly. Not just loud, but frenzied barking, so extreme that his body shook, belly flat undulating like waves on the nearby river. He jumped on Norm, grabbing his pant leg and with his teeth and dragging him close to Sandra. As if on cue, Sandra emitted a loud moan. She jerked her head backwards and her body went rigid. She toppled like a northern pine felled by a lumberjack straight into Norm's outstretched arms. She's having one of her attacks, Norm shouted. Stand back. Give her some air. He gently lowered her on the grassy bank along the ship and began wildly waving his Green Bay Packers cap in front of her face. A lady shrieked, "Is there a doctor in the house here?" Gaston's barks turned into pitiful howls as he sat in his haunches next to her. "I'm her guardian. Let me through," Vlad exclaimed as he pushed through the crowd and rushed down the gangplank. He knelt beside her and reached for her wrist. He could see the blue veins standing out in her frail arm, a tangled network, and he felt for her artery with his fingertips. Her pulse felt strong, and he let out a sigh of relief. "She's had a mild heart attack before, but her pulse seems to be all right," he said to the captain standing nearby. The man's forehead furrowed with concern as he knelt down beside them. Sandra let out another little moan, and her eyes fluttered open. "Oh, where am I?" she mumbled. "What happened?" And then she closed her eyes again. "You had one of your spells," Norm said, "but you're all right. Gaston, let me know just in time to catch you." The dog's howls changed to a whine as he stuck his head under her limp hand. Another moan, and then her blue eyes opened wide. "My goodness, Vlad, is that you?" She struggled to sit up. Vlad put his arm around to support her to a sitting position. Beatrice glided to his side with a cold glass of water. "What are you doing here? The last thing I remember is some rude fellow arguing with me about boarding the ship. Then everything went dark. I must have had a seizure." Every eye in the gathering cloud now turned to the reddening crew member and glared at him. "For shame," said an angry voice, "giving the poor old lady a heart attack." "She told you her service dog was trained," said another. "Let her on board so the rest of us can sign in, for heaven's sakes," said an irate lady on the line next. The crowd picked up the chant, "Let her on board, let the dog on." And we will see what happens when Sandra and Norm and Gaston join Vlad on the not-so-romantic cruise.